high achieving women who are actually like clearly capable and articulate in business go quiet in their most important personal relationships?
First of all, I want to say good morning and thank you for having me today. I'm really excited to be with you and have this conversation.
Hmm.
So it's a very important question, and it seems like a paradox, right? Smart, successful women who do a lot of really accomplished things, who are um, capable of saying things in some situations, have a hard time with others. Well, why would that be? Well, because the stakes are higher in personal relationships and more important relationships. And we as women are enculturated and brought up to be relationship oriented. And so our relationships are most important to us. And if a relationship is more important, then we value it more and we don't want anything to happen to it more. So when there's something that needs to be said in one of those kinds of relationships, women tend to hesitate because we're protecting the relationship and protecting our connection to that person.
Yes, the importance and the value of the relationship is really a key thing for sure as to how we relate to those people. It's kind of easier to go through life with the people that aren't a big deal and say what you want to say and be like, oh, well, if they don't like it, no big deal. But when it's those really close relationships, I can see how it can be a little bit more stifling because you want to tread lightly, not step on toes, and keep the peace and all of those kinds of things. So it's really interesting that you've found a way to speak with these women and to help them through these situations, which sounds extremely relevant. So, as they're going through, these relationships and coming to this point where they're getting quiet, what are some things that maybe might be showing up in their life or in their bodies that they
Well,
might notice?
I first want to start off with the way they feel. Most
Mm,
people think that resentment is anger. And while there's an element within the experience of having resentment that is anger, anger is usually a secondary emotion. The first emotion associated with resentment is hurt. Other emotions associated with resentment are disappointment, frustration, sadness, and then, of course, feeling unseen, unimportant, or feeling powerless. Having that experience combined, when it stays there and there's no clear path to get out of it, brings up anger. And so, what I like to say about resentment is that it's hurt that's been carried for too long. And it develops
mm,
when our feelings, needs, or disappointments build up over time and they don't have a healthy place to go. So they get stuck. Now, in terms of the body, there are many different signs of being in a situation where there's resentment. And sometimes people feel uncomfortable, but they don't know it's resentment, right? So this is a way to help identify it, to think of those feelings, to see whether or not those feelings are an experience that you're having. And then in the body, we withdraw physically, we speak to the person that we're having an issue with, and we hesitate. And in that process, the body also withdraws. There's more tension in different places. Our breath can become shallow. And we can have built up tension in certain parts of the body. And what I do when I'm working with people somatically is we take a look and we go to the body to really see where that tension is held and see if we can relate when they have a situation where they feel unsafe or they feel frustrated or uncomfortable. Where do they feel it? Do they usually feel it in their shoulders? Do they usually feel it in their arms? And so by learning the different patterns unique to each person, by learning your patterns, then you have a better idea like something's going on. I may not know what it is, but something's going on because I'm feeling that tightness again in my shoulders.
That's very interesting to think about how different people can have different patterns of how it's feeling and how it's showing up in their body. That reminds me of like that whole story about how the body keeps the score and something that we often refer back to. So when you're holding in, you'd say those emotions, that resentment that's turned to anger, like you said, how your body's like tense because of that. So you work with the body as part of this healing process. And do you know why those things are connected? Do you have any insight you could share with our listeners on how our bodies are connected with our mind and what's going on in our heads?
Well, there's a very big misnomer out in the world that everything is separate, and it's really not. When you have a feeling of discomfort because of an experience that you have, it shows up in the body because the body, mind, and spirit are connected. To say otherwise is to confuse the issue. And if you believe that's true, then of course you're going to be confused. Well, why would it show up in the body? What happens in different situations over time is that if you have a challenge or a difficult situation for which you are experiencing resentment, it will build up in the body and it will stay there. And so someone may have a chronic stiff neck, or they may have digestive issues, they may have other kinds of issues. Those are a symptom of something else that's going on. So knowing that there are certain areas of sensitivity in the body and knowing where they are for you is helpful for the purposes of being able to at least kind of recognize and have it be assigned to you. Something's going on. Let me kind of think about what's been happening now and then really get a sense of what this might be about. Some of the things that are really important to know about what happens with resentment is that often women who, I can't speak for all women, but I know many women who like to speak and share themselves with others, right? In speaking, one of the first things that happens over time is that a woman who's going through a difficult time because she has a need that hasn't been met, or she's asked for help with something and the person she's asked hasn't, you know, accommodated her, or she hasn't been able to figure out what to say, is this hesitation to speak. It is the very speaking that's going to help with resolving the issue potentially, but a lot of times women hesitate to speak because they don't want conflict, because they don't want someone to reject them. They're afraid of criticism. And one of the most powerful ones, I don't want to hurt your feelings. My feelings are hurt. But if I say something to you about how what you said to me and that thing you said to me hurt me, I might hurt you. So I'm going to hold my hurt instead of saying something because I don't want to hurt you. And then we get stuck in that paradox because we really do have something to say that's important, but we either don't know what to say, we don't know how to say it, or we're afraid of the consequences that will happen if we do.
Yes, yes, very true. Definitely don't want to hurt other people. That I think is one of the biggest ones because women are so in tune with our own emotions that we're always thinking about managing, trying to control everybody else's emotions. And sometimes we kind of just need to learn how to say what needs to be said. So I just really want to thank you so much for joining us today and make sure that I introduce you to our audience. So joining us today is Joan Suts. I'm messing it up now. Stenzler, and she is a communication design strategist, a women's empowerment and relationship breakthrough coach, and a holistic psychotherapist. She's known as a master facilitator, and her 8 week signature program, Finding the Courage to Speak Up, has helped women do everything from leave toxic workplaces and launch new careers to heal their health and save their marriages. Joan understands something most of us don't talk about openly, that many accomplished women who are thriving in every other area of their lives are quietly struggling to have hard conversations in their most important relationships. And that silence, it builds resentment, and resentment chips away at the connection we crave most. Now, her work exists to change that, and she's a catalyst for hope, and she teaches women and couples practical ways to make their relationship more satisfying and more successful. And I'm so glad to be able to have this conversation with you, Joan. And so you shared a little bit about the resentment. And can you tell us a little bit more about how to release that resentment?
Sure. I'd like to do that, but I'd like to add a couple of things first because I think it's
Mhm.
important because one thing builds on another. As I was preparing for our conversation, I realized there's a process that happens from the time that someone is hurt till the time that they go silent. And then from the time that they figure out, I really need to do something, and then they do it. So from the time that someone is hurt there ends up being a period of hesitation, less trust, difficulty with knowing whether or not they can rely on the other person, and then they go silent. And then what happens a lot of times for women, they start telling themselves stories, right? He doesn't care about me. She doesn't think I'm important. And this is the big one. Nothing here will ever change. And so then what happens is people get stuck, and then they are feeling resentful and all those other feelings that I mentioned before, sad and frustrated and feeling lost or isolated and alone. And then the distance happens. So in order to get past the distance, the very thing that is the scariest thing to do is what's needed. We need to be vulnerable. We need to be willing to say, you know what, something here is feeling stuck. Something here is not working. I'm not sure what it is, but to learn how to language it. And that's one of the biggest challenges most people have. That's why I call myself a communication design strategist, because I help people to literally craft the message that feels right to them, that's authentic for where they are and how they feel. And so in terms of what you asked me, one of the things that's very important is to be able to say, you know what, even though this is going to be hard, in order to be able to get past this barrier and have that important conversation to try to clear the resentment, I need to be willing to be vulnerable. And then, okay, now I'm willing to be vulnerable. Now what do I do? And a lot of women get stuck there because they don't really know how to approach the subject. They don't know when to approach it, and they're not really sure how to say it. And the key is being willing to find the courage to speak honestly, to listen openly, and create enough safety within the conversation so that understanding between themselves and the other person becomes possible. Now, there's a difference between having a conversation and feeling you need to agree with what the other person is saying, which is not what I'm talking about at all, and having a conversation and saying to yourself, I really want to understand where they're coming from. I want to understand what their situation is, and I'd like them obviously to understand mine. We need to be able to say we can agree to disagree, but if I understand where you're coming from, then I may be able to say, oh, wait a minute. I thought you meant this, or I thought you meant that. That helps to clear up misunderstandings and miscommunications. Because what happens a lot of times is people say one thing, and then we hear another, and then we interpret what we heard rather than what was said or what was intended. And so then everything gets tied up, and then we're angry about something that's not what the person meant.
Mm.
So one of my favorite expressions is, I think I understand what it is that you said, but I'm not sure that what my understanding is what you actually meant.
Mm. Yes, that's a good one. I think I understand what you said, but I'm not sure if that's what you meant. That's such a key difference. I never thought about it that way. But yeah, we hear one thing and then we interpret it based on, I like to say, our experiences, our mindset, our emotions, even at the moment, help us to interpret any given words that are being said to us. And when you're in a relationship and having those tough conversations, you could be anywhere. Like you said, you're telling yourself those stories in the beginning, the hesitation, that you're hurt and you're not sure if the other person still cares and things like that. So, how do you help people craft this conversation? Because I know some people may already be trying to have the conversation and they may be saying, hey, I don't feel like you care about me anymore, or I don't feel like we're here, like we feel like roommates, or, they may be bringing up all these different things. But are there better words, better language, better sentence construction you can maybe help them out with?
Yes. And before I do that, I want to just make an important point. This is something that most people skip over, and it's very important. The first thing I want to help the women that I work with do is to decide honestly, to figure out honestly, is the person that I'm trying to have this conversation with someone who wants to hear me, someone who has a history of being willing to listen before, and someone where it's likely that my attempts to share with them will be successful. Now, we can't predict what someone else is going to say or do. And in heated conversations, people will tend to get defensive. And so then things sometimes go sideways. But if you're dealing with someone that I refer to as a communication saboteur, right? Communication saboteur is someone who, no matter what you say, it's like banging your head against the wall because they're not interested in what you have to say. If you know that that person is someone, especially if it's family, which is really difficult, right? If you know that that person is someone with whom you've had a history of not feeling heard at all, like hands down, that would be a situation in which I would say, let's rethink where you take this to the next step because they may not be the right person to have the conversation with. Now, having said that, if you feel, you know what, this person is someone I love, they've been in my life for a long time, we've generally had good communication, but we're stuck here. Once you have a sense that there's something, that you have something to work with, right? Then the next thing would be to try to identify, well, what's the issue? What's the challenge? What's the problem that you're struggling with right now? And how long has it been happening? And is it something you've been able to discuss before? And in general, one of the ways to approach it is to say something like, I've been feeling uncomfortable lately, and I'm not quite sure what we can do about it, but I'd like to share with you my thoughts, if that's okay. And I'm interested in hearing yours also. I want this to be a conversation that's going to be productive and helpful for both of us because you're important to me and you matter in my life, and I value your friendship or your love or I value you. Are you willing to try to have a conversation? And I'm going to try my best to share with you how I feel and to do it in a way that is not accusing you, but just saying, when this happened, this is how I felt. Was that what you meant? Was that what you intended? What I got from that was I thought you might have whatever. And then, is that what you intended? Did I get it right? Or is there something else? Help me to understand. So, very often in these conversations, people make uh, an error in how they focus. Many times in these conversations, people focus on being understood. I've got to tell you how I feel. I've got to tell you. I want to be understood. When the real key to this is not focusing on being understood, but saying, you know what, I'm here to hear what you have to say. And I really want to understand where you're coming from. When you say that to someone else, that's a wonderful sign for them, an indication for them that they may be able to drop their guard a little bit. Oh, you want to understand. And so then that opens things up, allows them to feel it's safer to be vulnerable with you as you've been vulnerable and respectful and caring toward them.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that's really a good one. A really good point to come from the place of trying to understand the other person versus trying to make sure that they understand you. And in the process, hopefully, you'll both understand each other more because when you lead with that, it's a lot easier for the other person to also turn around and be like, oh, well, let me understand you. Now I'm not feeling attacked. Now I'm not feeling vulnerable. I'm feeling appreciated and like, oh, this person's coming to me. Let me, give as well. So I think that's a really great place.
The problem is, as many people in the world, there are many people in the world who've had wonderful parents. There are many people in the world who don't have wonderful parents, who are people who grew up and had children and didn't have anyone to show them how to communicate with each other. So when people come from houses, from families where there's been conflict, where there's been tension, where there's been addiction, where there's been illness, there are many different reasons why a family dynamic isn't able to support raising a child in a healthy way. And even if there's all those good things in place, Most people don't have someone to say, here's how you can say this. That's where I come in. And that's where my work is so significant and so important for people, because a lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, I feel so stupid. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do that? I said, listen, are you a rocket scientist? No. And they'll look at me like, why are you saying that? Well, you can't just say one day, you know what? I'm going into outer space. We have to learn how to do whatever an astronaut does, or an astrophysicist, and whoever it is that goes into outer space. You have to learn what they do first before you can do it. So you can't just say, I'm a smart, successful woman or man or couple, and so therefore I will magically know how to do this. It doesn't work that way. You need someone to help coach you and teach you some of the different strategies that will help you shift your own patterns of response, try new things, experiment with it, and see what works. And then once the pattern is shifted, I do a lot of work with couples, which is why I'm saying the pattern, which is between two people, once it shifts and you find the right pattern, it's like unlocking a safe. It's like something has been hidden and stuck, and all of a sudden the door is opening, and the feelings of love come back, and the feelings of connection come back, and gratitude enters into the picture. And suddenly what happens is people start feeling hopeful. People who've been stuck in resentment feel hopeless, and they feel like they can't do anything to change it. So they withdraw and they go into silence, and they live parallel lives without really connecting. And what I help people to do, both individually, and as couples and in my group coaching programs, is to be able to break through those barriers so that the door can open, and vulnerability will not only be possible, but it'll feel really good.
Yes, yes, definitely getting to that point where vulnerability feels good, where you can just be with your person and have those honest conversations is just, it's like the best place. Like everybody needs to be there. So I'm
Right.
so glad you're doing this work and helping people, especially women. So how did you come up with this framework and philosophy? Did you have to mix some things together? Was it experience? What brought you here?
Yes and yes. What brought me here? I come from a loving family, two very bright parents. My mom used to read three newspapers a day, and she knew more about what was going on in the world than I did. I would call her up and say, give me the latest report on what you've read. And my dad was an English teacher, so he taught me to love the spoken word. And over my lifetime, I have loved hearing people speak. I have loved listening to what they're saying, and really listening for the messages underneath the words. And so I've come to be very attuned to words, and very attuned to messages, and very attuned to what can help, what can heal, and what can hurt. And knowing how a small tweak here and there in words can make so much of a difference. And I learned that in my childhood, because a lot of times my parents didn't know what to say to each other and said the wrong thing a lot of the time. And I would be the one, I was probably about 7, that I would say, don't you think you could try it this way? This might work better. And my mom wasn't very appreciative of that, because this little pipsqueak at 7 is giving her feedback on how she could be more respectful to her dad. But I just always felt that that was so important. And, having learned from him the power of the spoken word and how words can heal, that's really become what I do in the work I do. When I'm sitting with someone, when I'm working with a woman or a couple, I'm very aware in the moment as we're talking of what I'm saying. And my brain is kind of watching what I'm about to say, and I will often shift what I say in order for it to be more effective in the moment, because I've done this for so long. Which is why when I hear someone's situation, I can say to them, well, if you were to say something like this, it might be helpful. And invariably, time after time, people will say to me, That's exactly what I was feeling. I couldn't put it into words, but because I'm very intuitive and I pick up on people's energy when I work with them, and because I can size up a situation and describe a way to express discomfort, people will then take that and try it. And what we say in the moment is, try this. If it doesn't work, tweak it and make it your own. And then people learn the language that works better. But the key to all of it, as we talked about a few minutes ago, was not seeking to be understood, but seeking to understand what's going on in their brain, in their world, what their experience is, which is likely to be very different than what you think it is.
Yes, very, very true. Very different than what you think it is sometimes. I love that you as a little 7-year-old were like, perhaps you might want to try it this way.
Trust me, I got a lot of flack from my mom about that. She did not like that. She really did not at all. And so from a very early age, what I discovered was I was very good at advocating for people, which is why I became a social worker. It's a natural part of the field. You know, I'm a psychotherapist as well, but the idea that someone who can't give voice to something important and they're in pain about it is something I've been very attuned to all my life. You know, so I'm like a magnet for people. When they're struggling with stuff, people will call me and they'll ask me how they can handle it, and I'm happy to be of help. You know, I think we're here on this planet. I think we're here in this life to be in relationship, and if we can't help one another, what's the point of being here?
Mhm. Indeed, indeed. And what you just said there about giving voice to something painful that we're dealing with, how would you explain like how being able to do that just expands our capacity to do so much more in this world once we've been able to vocalize those feelings and share that information with others and, move on to the other side of that rather than holding it in and building all that resentment?
A lot of answers to that question. First of all, it reverses so much of the other stuff. It brings a sense of relief. At least we've started the conversation, or I'm willing to be brave enough to try to figure out what to do, or oh, I thought he meant this, but that wasn't what he meant at all, or I assumed that was her intention, but I got it wrong. And because I thought I could read their mind, I went down a different path with the wrong information. So when you get the right information, when you clarify what someone was actually thinking, what someone was actually feeling, then you have a response to what's really going on, rather than all the stories that you have kind of filled in to interpret where they're coming from. So you can feel more open, more trusting. You can feel good about being vulnerable rather than feeling like I better protect myself from it. And then what happens is you start feeling more confident about your ability to do this, to figure out what to do next, because you did certain things and they worked. And then you feel like, wow, okay, I didn't think I could do that, but I did it. And that feels so much better. So it helps to propel you forward in a process of continuing to clear the air and reduce the miscommunication and eliminate the misunderstandings, to clarify them. And what we say is to bring repair. Because when you've been hurt, when there's been misunderstanding, when there are challenges and difficulties in your life around which you have held hurt for a long time, once you're able to heal that hurt, then we call it repair. You're repairing the injury within the relationship or within yourself. And so when you see that you're able to repair and that repair is possible, and it may be that you've never seen anybody do repair before, but you're the first one, boy, does that make you feel wonderful.
Yeah, yeah, that repair is so important and so key. And if To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us live or catching us in the replay. If what Joan is saying to you about communication and resentment and understanding and just communicating with people better is really speaking to you, or if you have questions, please feel free to let us know. Drop us a chat in the comment if you're here live, in the chat box if you're here live, or leave us a note or a question in the comments if you catch this later. So, Joan, I really love that you're able to share this with us because I think so many people kind of go through our days just having conversations and not really thinking about the mental load or the emotional load that might be coming with those conversations. So that's why I was really excited to talk to you about releasing that resentment and really just creating those deeper connections and being intentional about what we're saying and how we're saying it, especially in those important relationships, because we think about it all the time. If we're business women and we have speaking events, like you said, or if we're trying to get that next sale or that deal, we're really thinking about what we're going to say and how we're going to say it, how we're going to present ourselves. So, how do we bring that same kind of thought pattern into our most important relationships with our loved ones and family members?
That was a long question. And I'll
Sorry.
be honest with you, I'm trying to follow from the beginning to the end so I can answer you.
Yeah.
I think that all our relationships have a different level of importance, but they have a place in our life. And the business relationships are certainly important, and resentment can get you caught there as well. So learning how to do that in your personal relationships is something, once you can, that you can bring into that unresolved situation in your business. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. So if I'm
Yeah,
not,
don't.
please help me out here, because I'm a little bit unsure about where you
Yeah,
wanted.
no, you're fine. I dragged on there from my thought to my question, so it's fine. But yeah, you're answering it kind of backwards, but that's okay. It was basically about how they can work on that resentment and getting those deeper connections in their personal relationships because maybe they're really focused on doing that at work, keeping things under, how they need to be done, but don't think about it so much at
Okay,
home.
thank you, and I will
Yeah,
be happy to answer
yeah.
that. So first of all, it takes courage. It takes courage, a willingness to say, I know I need to be vulnerable in order to see if it's possible to break through the resentment to resolve this issue. And then it requires a willingness to have those conversations that you might more easily have with business partners or others that you deal with in your work, and learning how to do that, knowing that the purpose of those conversations, as we've been saying throughout this conversation here, is the purpose of it is to seek understanding. When you seek understanding from someone that you care about, who's important to you, it shifts the dynamic, because a lot of times people, when they're seeking understanding, they're like, huh, that's not what I thought you were saying. Or, huh, I had it all different. Oh, often there's a sense of relief, because when you discover that what you think they were saying is not what they meant, then you understand what they actually meant. And then it's like, wait a minute, now I need to adjust my expectations and the way I respond to this, because the information that I'm hearing is totally different. So it brings an openness to clarifying those misunderstandings. And the more you do that, the more you clarify the misunderstandings and then move forward in having a shared mutual commitment to understanding each other, the more trust gets built or rebuilt. And then the stronger the connection is. Right. And that's not easy to do, because we have to be vulnerable. And if we have, if we need to be vulnerable, we don't like the way that feels. I mean, it's better to just protect ourselves. Yet it really isn't, because without the vulnerability and without the willingness to take that chance and try to move from courage to the conversation to understanding, you won't receive the opportunity. You won't get the opportunity to improve the level of trust between you, which is essential for communication. And so it's the very thing that I specialize in. I work with women and couples who get stuck in resentment and in other challenges, and I help them unpack the origins of the discontent and then explore the roots of that. Often it comes from early childhood experiences. Often it's something that's been living in their being for their entire life and they didn't even know it. And
Mhm.
when I work with clients, we do a lot of reframing of beliefs and behavior. We modify that, learn to develop healthier beliefs and the habits that associate with them that allow you to develop the courage, rebuild the hope, and have a willingness to reconnect. And I do that as a therapist. I'm a therapist in New York State. I specialize in trauma resolution in my therapy practice, but also as a women's empowerment specialist and a relationship breakthrough coach. I use the power of communication and teach people how to use the power of communication to transform how they feel about themselves and about their relationships. A lot of times when I'm working with women who have been very hard on themselves. I mean, I hardly know a woman who isn't hard on herself because most of us are. We want to do better. We want to be seen in a positive way. We're really critical of ourselves. When I work with someone one on one, women's empowerment coaching or my therapy practice, we look at how important it is to bring kindness and patience to yourself. I say this to people, and they often say to me, kindness and patience to me. Wait a minute. No, no, I have to be driving myself and continuing to push myself to get where I want to go. And I say, you can do that. If you're self-motivated, that's not going to disappear if you're kinder or more patient with yourself. Because if you're having a hard time in whatever way, and you become angry with yourself, it's not going to help you to find a way through it. It's going to make it harder. So the key is to be able to be kind and patient with yourself, and then also kind and patient with others when you especially when you want to try to have that challenging conversation, and then seek that understanding, because without that kindness and patience, it's so much harder. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to be kind to myself and I'm going to make all these excuses for the things that I may not have done well, right? None of us do things well all the time, right? And I love the idea of a second chance, to giving a second chance to yourself. Like, I tried that the first time. I want to try that again, like beginning again, right? So that you can be more skillful. No one is being honest if they say that they've never done anything in an unskillful way. So looking at it and saying, oh, that didn't work the way I wanted. And oh, I feel badly about how that went. And because I know that now, that's important information, because then what I can do is I can say, oh, I can pivot and do something differently. But often when people become angry with themselves and are very hypercritical, they focus on what I did. It was so terrible. Oh, it was terrible, terrible. And then they get locked in to being angry with themselves about what they didn't do in the way they would have preferred it, instead of saying, that's good information. I don't feel great about it, but I'm not going to dwell on not feeling great about it. What am I going to do to correct it? What am I going to do to shift it and change it and then move forward? Because otherwise, what happens is you end up being hypercritical about every single thing that you don't do quite the way you had intended. And you know what? Sometimes the things you don't do the way you would have preferred end up giving you the biggest lesson you could have gotten. And without it, you wouldn't have learned what to do next.
Mhm. Very true, very true. And that's one of the things that I love to be able to look at with my clients is to have them do what we call is a positive intelligence test assessment. I don't know if you're familiar with positive intelligence, but they look at what your top saboteurs are. And for a lot of us, it is that hyper achiever and that judge, where we're constantly judging ourselves and we're constantly trying to achieve the next thing. And so those definitely conflict and cause problems with how we're seeing ourselves and how we're doing other things and then how we're relating to other people. So earlier you had mentioned something about when you're getting ready to have these conversations, you want to make sure that the person fits a certain criteria. And you gave us some things like they're willing to hear you. Um, how many times have you had the conversation before? all those types of different things. If they're not checking off the boxes and that's not looking like a good scenario, what are some other options or how are other ways to maybe reach that person?
Okay, so your question is interesting. I'm going to answer you and then we'll address the question.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, actually, I'm going to answer the question first. You may not be able to. With
Hmm.
some people, you may not be able to. And I think a lot of discernment is needed. Discernment in terms of what is the nature of your relationship with this person. Is this person a parent? Is this person a family member that you know you want to or need to have some kind of relationship with? Or is this someone that's been in your life for a while, who's been a thorn in your side, who has been difficult to deal with whom you have maybe had some fleeting good experiences, but most of the time you walk away going like this: oh, why did I do that again? Why did I try to have a conversation with them? If it feels like you're going like this, like you're two ships in the night, and there's no way for you to really connect so that you feel some level of satisfaction in the interaction. And sometimes you need to say, well, wait a minute, do I really want to have a relationship with this person? And if I do, what do I want it to look like? Because sometimes, even though we don't want to take distance from somebody, again, because we don't want to hurt their feelings or what have you, we don't want trouble or conflict or whatever. Sometimes the best thing you can do when you're having conflict with somebody is to step back and put distance between yourself and them, because number one, you're not being subjected to things that they might say or do that are dismissive or irritating or annoying or obnoxious. There's a whole long list of things we could say about that, right? First of all, you're also allowing yourself to experience what it's like to be in relationship with them from a distance. And if that feels better, I love this person and I'm going to see them 3 times a year at the holidays and bite my tongue whenever they start talking about whatever, right? Or, and I know many people in your audience can relate to that, right? The holiday conversation, that's one of the many free guides that I have about how to deal with that, right? Or um, is it somebody that you've grown tired of struggling with? And if it's somebody you've grown tired of struggling with and it feels like it's not only is it not going anywhere, but it feels like it's getting worse and you feel worse about it, then the question is, do I want this person in my life? Do I want to be in relationship with someone who's going to treat me in a way that I feel is not the way I want to be treated, that I don't like? And if when I've tried to say, that was critical, or I was uncomfortable with the way you said that, or whatever it might have been, and you get ignored, or the person argues with you, or as I often say, I have a lot of funny metaphors, if they try to kidnap the conversation and run away with it, like you're saying something, and they're just, they're gone, and you're like, what just happened? What's going on here? Some of those signs, they're indications that it's important to take a second look at this and say, do I even want to put myself in that situation? And then once you can determine, yes, I want a relationship with them, but I want to take more distance and see them on holidays and occasionally have a phone call instead of being more in touch or seeing them in person more often, and then saying, why did I do this to myself again? So being able to figure that out, and then or say to yourself, I love this person, they're a good person in heart, we've been able to get through difficult situations before, this is a big one, they're worth my effort, they're worth my time, they're worth me trying to figure out what to do. And then once you know that, then the next step is, well, how do I handle it? And as I said before, that's where I come in. People come to me when they're struggling with these kinds of situations. And I help them to find the words and the way to get through it when there is potential within the relationship to be able to have that happen. When the benefit you perceive, the benefit you believe is there when the person is worth having in your life, it's worth fighting for them. It's worth fighting for the relationship. The thing is that a lot of times people want to do it, but they're like, ah, I'm not going to be able to do this. So they need someone to help them feel hopeful and give them tools to be able to then move through it and find a way to connect. I've had people I've worked with over the years who've been on the verge of divorce. Some of them got divorced because they came to me too late, but a lot of people have come to me on the verge of divorce, and I've helped them to reframe their beliefs and modify their way of relating to each other, and they're more in love than they ever are. They
Mm.
ever were.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I was saying. So it's something that so many women live with resentment. And so many women don't realize that's what it is, but so many smart, successful women live with this resentment because they don't want to tell the other person, you hurt me, because if you say that to the other person, you might hurt them. So, like, I'll take it, I'll take one for the team, and I'll take another for the team, and I'll take 1,000 for the team. That's not a good approach, though, because if you can clear resentment, the relationship will get so much better, so much better. And it's not an easy process, but which is better, staying silent and being unhappy and feeling like you're just two strangers living in the same place, or two strangers in the same relationship, or trying to find a way to build that trust again and to bring your relationship to a place where you're closer? I mean, I think the second has always been better. And yet so many people will, anything, I have to do anything to avoid that, and then they live in resentment, and that affects your health. Going back to what you said earlier in the conversation, living with resentment and negative energy in your body because of these uncomfortable, unpleasant feelings will have an adverse effect on your health. And that's part of the conversation we have. When someone comes in and they say, oh, I have certain things going on, we often will trace it back then to a resentment, because I do work also with people that have different physical ailments, and the doctor can't figure out what it is and why. And sometimes I'll say, I'm wondering if it's because, and people will often say to me, I think that's what it is.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
it's deeper than just the medical physical issue. It's really mind, body, spirit combine, and how the mind, when it's ruminating over, I wish this would be different, I wish it would be different, and I don't feel important, and he doesn't appreciate me. And when you do that, after a while, it really has an effect. And so, like, nobody wants those stories in their brain, nobody wants them there, but it's like they're there and it's annoying. How do I get them out? And again, that's what I do. That's the kind of work that I do. um, I help people to be able to find their voice and speak up.
Mhm. Yeah, very important, very important. So many things in there to unpack. Like one of them, the last part, I'm gonna have to work it backwards, was like women having a significantly higher incidence of autoimmune disease. I had to look it up because I couldn't remember the percentage, but approximately 70 to 80% of all patients are female. And a lot of that is linked to a lot of what's going on with our relationships and our mindset in our experiences that's affecting our body. And you go to the doctor, you're like, I feel terrible, I have no energy, I have this, I have that. And they're like, your labs are fine. You're great. You're good. And you just keep, your labs are fine. You're like, but I don't feel fine. And a
Mhm.
lot of time it traces back to these kinds of things. And then the other thing that you brought to my mind was a lot of the talk we're doing right now is about women. And of course, when we think about women in our age groups and things, we think about moms and we think about husband wife relationships. But then there's also a lot of this that I'm seeing on the internet lately of the no contact situation with parents. And you talked a little bit about that by touching on the holiday thing. Like, I'll see you 3 times a year. I think that's probably better than no contact. Um,
Mhm.
but those relationships where people are trying, they are saying, I've been hurt. And the other person's like, that never happened. Or what are you talking about? Um, what are some things that we can do on our own side if we're experiencing something like that, or the ladies that can deal with that resentment on their own because they're never going to get that, what do you call it? You know the word I'm looking
Satisfaction.
for,
Satisfaction.
the satisfaction or the acknowledgement from that other person that, yes, I hurt you and I'm sorry. It's just going to be like, that never happened until the day they die. They will take it with them to the grave.
Well, first of all, you do a lot of talking to your girlfriends and
Mhm. Yeah.
close family and friends, men and women, depending on who's in your important group of people. Um, and the reason that that's really important is to be able to get validation elsewhere. You know what? You're absolutely right. That was not the way to treat you. You have a right to feel uncomfortable with that, because if you're not going to get validation from the person from whom you were hurt, by whom you were hurt, it's important to be able to have somebody reality test how you're feeling. And if you are indeed feeling that you were treated badly, it's critical for someone to be able to say, you know what, I get it, I hear it, I get it, and I can totally understand why you would feel that way. Because if someone did that to me, that's how I would feel. So seek it elsewhere because you need it and it's important. And I think there are two pieces of that. First of all, the validation piece, but the other piece of it is there was a great song years ago. I have no idea who sang it, but I love this expression because it fits perfectly to this situation. What could have been, but never was never meant to be. So your wish and your hope for that person to be the thoughtful, considerate, um, receptive human being who's going to hear what you have to say and pay attention and take it seriously and acknowledge. If that person doesn't have the capacity to do that for whatever the reason, right? You don't want to get into their stuff, right? For whatever the reason, then you need to say, you know what? It's just not for me. I need to consider whether or not this is a relationship that I want to have in my life. Because when that person is with me, my energy is drained and I'm exhausted and I feel frustrated and I walk away and I feel worse than when I came. So, you know, those people are, I always say you never grow from the fun stuff. You never grow from the fun stuff. You have fun, but you don't grow from the fun stuff. Not usually, sometimes, but usually you grow from the hardest things that you have to deal with, that you have to face. And when you're dealing with someone who's that difficult, you have a choice. You can try endlessly to get them to see and break your like knock your head against the wall. It's like a dead end. And the other thing, this is another analogy that I really like. When you go to someone seeking nourishment and acknowledgement and they have nothing to give for whatever the reason, right? It's like going for water but going to a dry well. Because when you go to a dry well, what happens? You don't get water, you get sand in your mouth. And it's the same experience when you're dealing with someone that doesn't have the knowledge, understanding, capacity, or willingness to meet you part way instead of invalidating you. Oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, why do you feel that way? Oh, after a while, that really wears you down. That's part of the reason why when women are in abusive relationships, they feel so poorly about themselves because they're worn down by those negative messages. One of the reasons I'm doing the work I'm doing is because I truly believe, as crazy as the world is now, and it's doesn't that word doesn't even come close to what I think about the world. Women are the solution. We are. So it is my desire in my work and in my life, in my relationships, to help elevate other women and help them feel better about themselves so that they can go out there and have a positive influence on other people, because we're a lot smarter than the men out there. There are very smart men out there, but we have more ability to get what's going on because we're very relationship oriented. And it's so important to find ways to love yourself, to hold yourself accountable, but then also to choose who you want to have around you so that you can lift your energy up, and then also have the support you need from the therapists or the coaches or whoever, whichever other practitioners you need to help you with your physical, emotional, or spiritual well-being.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I definitely find that it is true. And that's one of the reasons I focus on moms personally, is because I feel like moms spend so much more time with the children generally and passing on these things like you're teaching here about how to speak with people, how to interact with people, how to have emotional intelligence. And if we can reach more women, I think we can improve generational health, and happier people lead to healthier people and a better planet in my mindset. So that's what we're always striving for, is happier, healthier people and reaching more harmony in life, and just trying to get things to, go with that ebb and flow instead of trying to be so strict and rigid with balance. But we are running out of time, amazingly enough. So, um, if you can keep it short, I did have one last question, and that was about, as far as something that people could take with them today if they needed to figure out a way to start working on their relationship. What is one thing that you would tell them they should start with? Is it possible to get that into one little short little piece?
You
Because I
never
know you still have something you want to share with everyone as well.
you never know what's possible till you try. You never know what's possible till you try. And if you say to yourself, it's not possible, you're absolutely right. It's not going to be possible, because if you don't try, then you won't see whether or not it is possible.
Very, very true. You never know. Awesome. Like what is it? Michael Jordan missed all the shots he didn't take or something like that. I forget how the quote goes right now.
Right?
But yeah, you've got to
Right.
try.
It's right. And it's not about what you did that didn't work. I'm not a baseball fan, but they tell me
Yeah,
that
yeah.
there's a batting there's a batting average, and the more you get up to bat, the more chances you are of hitting a home run. So in order to be able to get to that home run, you've got to have a lot of strikes.
Mm, yes, yes. You're gonna have
So
a lot of
not
strikes.
not seeing so I would say don't see the strikes as a problem. See the strikes as part of the mistakes, as part of your learning process to get to the things you want to get to.
Awesome. And so, like I was saying, you did have something you wanted to share with everyone today. I know you have an event coming up, and you also had a free gift for everyone. So if you want to
I
share what
do.
those are, that would be
I
great.
I do. And in line with what you said before about women having a much higher incidence of autoimmune illness, and coming out of the doctor's office feeling like, well, that wasn't helpful. He just told me my labs were fine, but I feel terrible. I have recently joined, very excited to be a co-founder of a group called the Phoenix Wellness Network. And we are a group of holistic practitioners dedicated to providing people with a variety of solutions that are heart centered, grounded in solid theory, science, psychological theory, to help people finally find that person they've been looking for, who's not going to say, oh, there's nothing wrong, who's going to help you go deeper and help you to figure out what would be of support to you. And we have a very exciting event next Wednesday, June 10th, from 12 to 1:30. It is free. It is mainly to provide you with valuable information. Each of us is going to do a presentation. A number of us are going to do meditations. I'm going to do one of my favorites on opening to new possibilities. And you are welcome to come. And to register, um, I believe you're going to give the link for that. Okay.
Yeah, we went ahead and put it in the chat. It'll also be in the description later. So the
The web, the
phoenixwellnessnetwork.com
Phoenix
slash
Wellness
workshop.
Network. So if you're looking to find out about the network itself, go to the website, thephoenixwellnessnetwork.com, which you can see in the chat. You just take off the workshop part and the slash, and then you can use that to learn about our mission to create a movement that brings high quality, high touch, whole person care and services to women and others who have struggled to find the right fit. Um, I am also offering everyone a free gift today, which is called Stop Carrying It All. It's a women's communication guide, which gives practical tips on how to stop pushing past your exhaustion. If anybody out there can relate to that, I know I can. Ask for help at home and say no without feeling guilty. And you're going to put it in the chat for us so people can get it. I also, again, as I said before, I offer therapy in New York State, but I also have coaching packages that I am in the process of consolidating, working on firming that up, on giving you a confidence boost, helping you to deal with communication issues. So communication strategy sessions, and also relationship breakthrough. And if you're interested, you can reach me. I didn't give you my email, but you can reach me at info@youramazingjourney.com. Info@youramazingjourney.com. I offer free consultations. I'd be happy to hear from you. And I've been delighted with this conversation today. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joan. It's been really great. To all of the viewers, please leave us your biggest takeaway from this conversation in the comments. And thank you for joining us today for this episode of the Harmony Principle podcast, where we share ideas that help you return to rhythm. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out. We'll see you next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bye
Have
bye
a
for
great
now.